Hi, you're on the Retelling Films channel, and this is a retelling of the movie A Cure for Wellness. A successful yappy arrives at a remote sanatorium at the foot of the Alps, where visitors are subjected to strange water treatments. The movie begins with a businessman working late at the office. Suddenly, he gets a chest pain, drinks water from the cooler, and is overtaken by a heart attack. The businessman drops dead in a deserted office, only his photo on the wall, as the best employee of the year stares blankly at everything that is happening. The train rushes through the picturesque scenery of the Swiss Alps. It carries the protagonist, an aspiring financier, on a business trip. The young man chews nicotine gum and talks on the phone, making business and money. The trip is interrupted by flashbacks. Lockhart moves to a new office. His superiors appreciate him. When the young man is called upstairs, he is full of optimism, but the board of directors shows him a strange letter from the general director of Pembroke, who has gone to an alpine sanatorium, and from there sent a notice that he is quitting the business. But the thing is, his signature is crucial to an upcoming deal. Lockhart is sent on a business trip to find and bring the general director to New York. Thus, he will make amends for financial fraud. Otherwise, he will go to jail. Before leaving, he visits his mother in a nursing home, gives her a handmade ballerina figurine as a keepsake, and says goodbye to her son, certain that he will not return. On a winding road, Lockhart is driven past a village at the foot of a mountain with a sanatorium on top. The driver tells a legend that there once stood the castle of a baron obsessed with blood purity. The peasants burned down the estate when he decided to marry his own sister. They drive onto the property. The young businessman sees old men in white robes enjoying themselves outdoors. Lockhart asks the driver to wait, and himself goes to the reception area. The visit is closed for the day, and then Yappy asks to call the administrator. Waiting, the young man tries to call the office, but the connection here does not catch. He wanders across the green lawn, where he notices in the wall of an old chapel a ventilation window to the basement. While talking to the doctor, the young man notices an old photo from the construction of a sanatorium on the site of the burnt-out castle. The doctor treats him to some local miracle water, and he takes vitamins from a blue bottle. The doctor offers to come back in the evening when the procedures are over. The hero has nothing to do but to get back into the car and drive away. On the way out, he notices a girl in a blue dress on the wall of the fortress. On the way back, a deer crashes into the car of the protagonist, which leads to an accident. Lockhart loses consciousness and wakes up in a sanatorium ward. He is met by Dr. Heinrich Volmer, who informs him that he has broken his leg and had to put a cast on it. The doctor informs that he has reported to the young man's superiors about unforeseen circumstances, and he himself will have to spend a few days in a sanatorium. The main thing is to drink plenty of water to acclimatise successfully. After the conversation, Lockhart stands at the window and watches the window at the base of the chapel being patched, then drinks a glass of water and notices a small spot on the glass that turns out to be some kind of insect. The young man wanders around the building, watching the patients under the supervision of the staff as they engage in various water procedures. Soon he himself is invited to take a steam bath. In a sauna full of steam, Lockhart gets lost at one point and finds that the passage behind him has disappeared. He finds himself in a confined room with no exit, but a few moments later he sees a corridor with a deer at the end of it. He goes there and finds Pembroke, the purpose of his visit. The old man refuses to return to the city for business. He speaks of the need to purify himself, and then remembers the young man's father. They started out together before leaving him behind. Suddenly, the old man agrees to return home for a few days. Lockhart asks at the reception desk for a cab. He waits outside, where he is approached by Mrs. Watkins, a great lover of mysteries. She researches the history of the place as well as local legends. Lockhart sees a girl in a blue dress. Her name is Hannah, and she is a special patient. Lockhart admits that she will soon leave, to which she wonders, why leave here? The beautiful scenery of the mountains makes the guy think about it. Upon returning, Lockhart cannot find Pembroke. In the dining room where the patients are with Dr. Volmer, the doctor admits that after talking about work, the Pembroke felt ill and was referred for special procedures. The young man breaks down into a scream, but suddenly his nose bleeds and he falls unconscious. Volmer examines him in his office. Lockhart, at such a young age, already needs special care. Yuppie agrees to the doctor's offer, but it's worth it to get out as the kid steals Pembroke's medical records. While giving urine, Lockhart notices that in one test tube, in addition to the liquid, there is something foreign that looks like parasites. Lockhart is placed in a sensory deprivation chamber. He is warned that the lack of stimuli may lead to hallucinations. Floating in the liquid, the young man reminisces about his childhood, but suddenly notices many river eels around him. He tries to call for help, but the doctor cannot hear him, distracted by a nurse. While trying to surface, Lockhart loses the oxygen hose and suffocates in the water, unable to open the lid. As his pulse drops, he remembers his father's death. He stopped the car with his son right at the bridge, stepped out into the road, and jumped over the railing. An orderly brings Lockhart back to consciousness, and they examine the chamber, but there are no eels inside. In the chamber, the protagonist reviews Pembroke's medical history and notices oddities with his jaws. He is distracted by a strange noise from the bathroom, the handle of the cistern twitching randomly. Walking over to the toilet, Lockhart notices a worker rolling a body cart into the chapel. The next morning he has a conversation with Mrs. Watkins. She tells him that the villagers burned down the castle, the reason being the medical experiments for which the Baron was kidnapping people. Their dried corpses were found in the fields. Lockhart suspects that the Baron was seeking medicine for his wife. Mrs. Watkins is taken away for treatments. A young man examines the door in the tower, but is chased away by a worker. Noticing Hannah, the hero goes to her. He asks her to give him a ride on her bicycle to the village, giving him in return a commemorative figure of a ballerina received from her mother just before her death. The two of them ride down the mountain to the village. Lockhart leaves the girl alone in the pub and himself goes to the veterinarian in the building opposite to consult on Pembroke's medical history. The result turns out to be interesting. Despite drinking heavily at the sanitarium, the loss of teeth is due to dehydration. The veterinarian also adds to the legend that the Baron's wife was infertile. Every attempt to conceive a child has resulted in the miscarriage of a deformed fetus. At the end of the conversation, the vet ripped open the belly of a cow that had been drinking water from a spring in the mountains, and its insides were full of live eels. At the pub, Lockhart calls the office. It turns out that the doctor didn't warn anyone about the accident. He wants to talk to Hannah about what's going on at the sanitarium, but a local punk has his eye on her. A fight ensues, interrupted by the arrival of Dr. Volmer. He takes the fugitives back to the sanatorium. In the room, the doctor and Hannah are almost arguing. The girl feels a pain in her stomach, but the doctor promises to cure it. Lockhart dreams of a naked Hannah in a bathtub full of live eels. He wakes up from a nightmare and sees a worker rolling an empty gurney out of the basement. At the mirror, the protagonist notices a tooth wobbling and easily coming off. He goes to the waiting room to report it, but when the nurse leaves, he sees on the appointment list the current location of Pembroke. He's in the transfusion wing. The hero heads there, trying to avoid being seen by the staff. Near the elevator is a gurney with a body on it. The old man lying there suddenly opens his eyes and screams. This helps distract the orderlies from the elevator, and while they examine the screaming old man, Lockhart sneaks into the elevator and goes below. He finds several rooms with barrow-chambers. In another room, Mrs. Watkins is lying on a gurney. She reveals that she left Lockhart some clues. It is also revealed that the Baroness was pregnant, but the mob cut the fetus from her belly and threw it into the lake. However, the infant miraculously survived. Guy notices parasites under the woman's skin and recoils in horror, dropping a metal rack. Orderlies run to the noise, from whom he hides behind one of the many doors. There are many water tanks with people floating in them, including the General Director Pembroke. In anger, Lockhart tries to break the glass, but nothing comes out. He runs up the stairs but runs into the paramedics and Dr. Volmer. The medics drag him to the dentist's office to check what's wrong with his tooth. Lockhart is put in clamps, after which the front tooth is drilled out. Unknown how he got out of the chair, the guy climbs into the car that brought another patient and asks to be taken away urgently. They go to a policeman's office where Lockhart claims illegal experiments on patients. But when the cop comes out to make a phone call, the hero sees a branded blue vial of vitamins in the closet. A policeman returns to the office with a doctor who refers to Lockhart as a patient suffering from hallucinations and aggressive behaviour. Pembroke appears next, confirming that he has been threatened by the young man. The fact that the Pembroke is alive throws the protagonist off balance. He doubts his own sanity and returns to the boarding house. In the morning, he sits in his room at the table in front of Mrs. Watkins' notes. His attention is drawn to the sound of the cistern's handle twitching. When he removes the lid, he sees many blackheads inside, but after a second, they disappear as if they had been flushed down the drain. Lockhart unscrews the toilet tank to check, but the blackheads don't appear again. The hero writes a letter to the board of directors, similar to the one Pembroke wrote earlier. He then undergoes a series of treatments. But at one point, the guy breaks a glass of water and cuts the cast on his leg with a shard of glass. The leg is fine, it's not broken, as the doctor says it was just a deception. After breaking the lock, he climbs into the basement with a shovel. Inside is an underground lake and an ancient laboratory. In it, there are stored specimen eels, many records, deformed human embryos, and skin removed from someone's face. There's also a sort of altar with a portrait of the Baroness, who looks a lot like Hannah, only a little older. Going down below, Lockhart sees a gurney with a body. Under a sheet is the late Mrs. Watkins. A worker comes from above. The guy hides and witnesses the worker dumping a corpse into the lake, where eels rush at him. A fight breaks out between the worker and the hero. Lockhart smashes his opponent's head with a brick and escapes. Frightened Hannah does not understand what is happening and goes to the dining room to Dr. Volmer. When he sees the blood on her dress, he, in turn, rejoices. Lockhart appears and tells her to let her go. The doctor tries to negotiate, but the young man tells the patients that they are being cheated here and poisoned with incomprehensible water. The old men rise from their seats, but not to protest at all. Instead, they grab Lockhart and take him downstairs to the transfusion unit, where they place him in a barocamera. Volmer explains that the water in the lake allows the eels to live dozens of times, longer than their species lives under normal conditions, but it is toxic to humans unless the water is first filtered. And the filters are human bodies, from which a mysterious blue medicine is vaporized. It is this medicine that helps the locals live for many years. Later, the doctor tells Hannah that she's gone from a girl to a woman. She goes to Lockhart, who is sitting on a bench outside, and returns the ballerina, telling him that he has encouraged her in vain, as if she could leave here because the doctor will never let her go. And the young man suddenly ceased to understand why he should leave here at all, because it is so beautiful. In the evening, dozens of employees of the sanatorium and the village organise a wedding ceremony for the doctor and Hannah. Volmer leads the girl to an underground lake where there is a laboratory, an altar and a bed. Here they are to conceive a child. Hannah refuses, but the man ties her up. In retaliation, the girl punches him in the face and the skin on his forehead splits. Lockhart, holding the ballerina in his arms, comes out of his stupor. Matching the words of the late Mrs. Watkins, he breaks a glass window in the administrator's office with a 100-year-old photograph from the time of the boarding house construction. There is a man with a bandaged head holding the hand of a little girl in a light-coloured dress. Realising that the doctor is the Baron who discovered the cure for ageing, and Hannah is his daughter, the hero flees to the dungeon, where he spills gasoline. The Baron tries to interrupt him. He even removes the leather mask from his face, exposing green burnt skin. But Lockhart sets the fire anyway. Sparks fly into the ventilation system and set fire to the curtains in the hall, where the nursing staff is having a ball in honour of the wedding ceremony. A fight ensues, and Volmer is about to feed the young man to the eels when Hannah appears. With a powerful blow, she stabs the shovel into her father's disfigured face. Once out of the dungeon, Lockhart and Hannah admire the fire, against which the patients continue their dance, leaving the fire-ravaged building behind. They ride away on their bicycles, but crash into a car on a curve. The board members are inside. Lockhart does not listen to their orders. Instead, he gets back on his bike and rides away with the 200-year-old girl grinning like a madman. What do you think about this movie? Please write your thoughts about this movie in the comments. I will be very interested to read your thoughts about this movie. If you liked the video, please like it and subscribe so you don't miss new videos. See you soon!